Hello, this is Hayden Falzon from falzonfantasy.com, and today we're going to be continuing with part 2 to the Earth in the Eevee engine. We'll be focusing on creating a dynamic day and night cycle. So as you can see here in my viewport, I'm able to rotate my sun lamp, and the Earth is going to update to reflect that change. So wherever there's shadow, the night lights from the Earth map will be displayed, and wherever there is light, the diffuse normal texture will be displayed. So that is what we're going to be working on today. It's going to be a rather quick tutorial, but I hope that you enjoy it nonetheless. So in the last part of this tutorial series, we created the base texture of our Earth and also created this fake volumetric clouds using an array-based system. So your Earth should look something like this at the present time. We are going to want to be in the Earth material setup that we've created last tutorial, and our first step is that we're going to create a mask that is going to split up our day from our night. And to do this is actually quite simple in the Eevee engine, thankfully. I'm going to disconnect my shaders from the output and just hide the cloud values so that we can have a clear idea of what we are working with. So with my Earth selected again, I am now going to get started on creating this dynamic day and night mask. I'm then going to search for my diffuse BSDF shader and drag that in and plug the value into the output. Now as you can see, this is exactly what we want. We want this black and white mask because, well, the diffuse BSDF shader, it's going to update according to where the sun is. But we cannot use shader values as mask values, so that's the only problem. So we have to navigate that, and thankfully the Eevee engine has quite a nifty trick up its sleeve to do just that. So the node that we're going to get is very, very simple. It is shader to RGB. So what is this going to do? It's going to take our shader values and turn it into a color value, which is essentially exactly what we want. So instead of this being a shader output now, it is now a color output. So for all intents and purposes, a mask. The next node that we're going to want to get is a math node. So we're just going to plonk that in there so that our shader to RGB color value is going to the first value of an edge, and we're going to change the second value to 0.01. Now this is going to mean that the black values aren't going to be entirely black, but we can affect this by creating a color ramp and putting that just after the math node so that it will be the last node on this sort of system that we're working on. So we can now affect the colors by dragging the black and the white values. The color ramp just gives us options so we can tweak things down the road. The next thing that I'm going to do is going to make sure that the white values of the color ramp are completely white and the white values of the diffuse BSDF shader are completely white. So we can do that by just clicking on them and then just dragging the value up to 100%. Now, for the sake of organization, I'm just going to make these nodes kind of line up, and then I'm going to select them all. After that, I'm going to hit Ctrl G to turn them into a group. You should see these two little other nodes that are going to be on the end and the front of these nodes. These are your input and your output, so just make sure that everything lines up and it should be good. We can exit and enter our node group by pressing Tab while it's selected. I'm now going to rename this node group to Night Mask. And one of the main reasons as to why we are doing this is because that we're going to reuse this mask a lot of times during this tutorial series. So instead of having to duplicate all those nodes and then for it to create a mess in our node setup, we just have to duplicate one node, our node group. After reconnecting our base material that we've already created to the output and moving the night mask out of the way, we can now drag in our Illumination Map that I've saved, and the link to this map will be in the description. And we're going to then set it up the way that we've set up all of our input image textures. So the interpolation will be cubic, the projection will be sphere, and then we're going to make the last one extended. And just to give you an idea of what this map looks like, I'll plug it into the output so that we can get an idea. So this is the Earth as it is. And we're going to want to add a emission shader to it so that it is going to be, well, an emissive map. We are then going to create an RGB curve to pass the texture data from into our emissive shader. So we're just going to plug that in there. And now what we're going to do is we're going to take this value right here and just drag it slightly to the right. And this is just going to clamp all those higher values so that we're just left with the much lighter values. So it's going to create this really nice contrast between the land and the lights. But please don't feel that you have to do exactly everything that I'm doing. You have to make this Earth your own, so you can change the values, you can make it look however you want it to. This is just a basis to base your own creation on. After reconnecting all of our material, we are ready to move on. Let's add a mix shader. We're then going to put our emissive output into the bottom input of our mix shader. Doing so is going to make our lights turn up at half their value across the entire globe, even in areas where it is lit by the sun, which is not what we want at all. So it is now time to plug in our night mask output, so our color data, right into the factor of our mix shader. And as you can see, we've got our values incorrect with our night mask, but this is really easy to fix. That's why we created that color ramp. So we can go straight in and then we can just flip it as such. We could use an inverse for this, but it's just easier to have that one node there. And then we can tweak the values to our heart's content and change the interpolation to whichever one you think looks the best. I'm going to choose ease because it adds a gradual gradient. I'm then going to check over the light and dark parts of our Earth and just make sure that nothing is amiss. If it is, you can just tweak those values a little bit. Now, with my sun selected, I can now rotate the light source and you will be able to see the dynamic nature of this mask. So as the shadow hits our land masses, you'll see that the lights are, well, effectively turned on. We can now turn our cloud object back on, and we're just going to give it a really quick render out just to kind of get an idea of what it looks like when rendered. Looking pretty good if I do say so myself. I will now show you one way of how we can change the color of the lights. So firstly, let's save this out, because as you already may know, Blender 2.8 beta can be a bit unstable at times. Now, one way that we could change the lights is just by using this RGB curve here, but I'm going to show you just another way that may prove to be more simplistic. So we are going to want to add in a mix RGB node, and we're going to plonk that into here. And then we're going to change the mix value from a mix to an add. We are then going to want to put our color output from our RGB curve into the factor of our new add RGB. We're then going to change color 1 to a black and color 2 to any light value. And this color 2 will essentially become the color that our lights will inherit. So let me example this for you. If I change this white value to a bit of a yellow, you can see that it inherits a bit more of a yellow color. We could even make the Earth lights blue if we really wanted to, although it looks very strange. Ultimately, when doing this, we want to keep our colors pretty saturated, so very close to the center, as I feel that gives off a more real feeling to it. If you would like this effect to be a bit more subtle, we can take the color output from our RGB curve and put it into color 1. So now when we pick a color, instead of changing to that color outright, the effect will be much more subtle, and it will be more of a tint than anything else. So let us render this out and see what it looks like. Upon rendering, your Earth should look something similar to this. It already looks pretty good, but in the next part we're going to be focusing on creating an atmosphere for our Earth. We will not be using volumetrics, instead we'll be using a clever shader technique that I've come up with. So if you would like to stay tuned for that and be kept up to date as to when that is coming out, you can hit that subscribe button and hit that bell. By the end of this tutorial series, your Earth should look something like this. I would like to thank everybody who has watched this tutorial up to this point, and I would like to thank especially the people who've subscribed and liked and commented. I've really appreciated all of that. If you would like, you can check out my website at www.falsonfantasy.com. The tutorials section is now up and working, so you can watch my tutorials from there if you should so choose. And as always, if you have learned something in this video or have liked it, please give it a like, and if you would like to stay up to date with my content, please consider subscribing and hitting that bell button. Thank you so much for watching. This is Hayden Falzon from Falzon Fantasy, signing off.